Hi class, and welcome to the first video in our new unit of ecology. What is ecology? Ecology is the scientific study of the relationships that living organisms have with each other and with their abiotic environment. We're going to become very familiar with this term abiotic. A means without and bio means life, so abiotic means non-living or without life. This is a great culminating unit because we're going to take everything we've learned all year about life and we're going to start to put it all together. How do organisms interact with each other and how do they interact with the earth that they live on? So some really exciting content in this video. So this video in particular, we're going to look at the whole biosphere and specifically how energy flows through the biosphere and how matter is recycled. And in future videos, we'll take a closer look at those interactions, those community interactions, and then more specifically at populations and how populations grow. But we're going to start off big and then work our way small throughout the next couple weeks. So let's learn about the levels of the biosphere. Now remember, ecology is all about interaction, so I want you to remember that interactions are happening among all of these levels all of the time. So I came up with kind of a cute example to show you the levels of the biosphere. The very smallest level is that of the actual individual. And this is a cute little spider monkey who lives in the high canopy of the tropical rainforest. Now, when we get a lot of spider monkeys together, the same species, we have what's called a population. All spider monkeys living in the same area at the same time. The next level is when we add in other species besides just spider monkeys. So what spider monkeys eat, other types of birds and plants that are in the high canopy, and that's called the community. So all species in the same area at the same time as a community. The next level up, we start to add in abiotic factors. So this is called an ecosystem. It's the community plus abiotic factors like sun, wind, rain, those sort of things. And then when we get a whole bunch of similar ecosystems together, we get what's called a biome. And so the biome that the spider monkey lives in is called the tropical rainforest. And all sorts of biomes. You guys will be going to be doing some small projects about the different biomes. There's aquatic biomes like the ocean, there's land biomes like a temperate forest. And when you get all of Earth's biomes all together, you come back again to the largest level, which is the biosphere. So I want to go back to this individual, right? This individual spider monkey. What does it do? Where does it live? Well, there's a difference between a habitat and something called a niche. And so I want you to know the difference. A habitat is just simply where you live. So the habitat of a spider monkey is the upper canopy of the rainforest. But niche, on the other hand, is a little bit more. It's not only where you live, but it's what you do. So it's like your home address and it's your profession. So in the case of the spider monkeys, yes, they live in the upper canopy, but they also have a highly social community. They eat fruits, they eat nuts and leaves, and they disperse these seeds through their feces. So they do play a very important component in the ecosystem by sort of dispersing those seeds elsewhere. Okay, now I want you to think about this question and write the answer down in your notes. No two species can have the same niche. Why is that? All right, all sorts of factors affect all of these levels of the biosphere, and there are two broad types of factors. Abiotic, which remember means non-living, so this is sun, wind, rain, soil, rocks, pH, temperature, all sorts of non-living factors will affect life. And obviously biotic factors will also affect life. So plants and animals are going to affect an organism as well as predators and just in general the density of life in that area. If that area is very, very densely populated, there's going to be a lot of competition and therefore that organism might not be able to get all the resources that it needs. So when we look at the levels of the biosphere, you have to be thinking it needs energy. The individual, the population, the ecosystem, all of that requires energy, and hopefully you know that all the energy does come from the sun. And the sun, it flows directly to the earth, specifically to plants, right? That's where all of the energy goes initially, is to plants. And then, you know, animals eat the plants, we go about our daily activities, but then where does the energy go? Well, it actually flows out and it's dissipated as heat. Every metabolic activity you are doing right now is taking energy from the food you eat and it's dissipating it as heat. Energy flows through a system. It flows through an ecosystem from the sun to life, and then it gets released as heat. So very important to understand that every life event that uses energy actually releases that energy as heat, and that is called a byproduct. So energy flows through a system. Make sure you understand that. And we can depict this energy flow multiple ways. One of the easiest ways that you might already be familiar with is called a food chain. So this should look very familiar to you going from bottom to top. We're going to start with the plants, right? Because I said that's initially where all the sun's energy goes, right? These are also called autotrophs. They're also called producers. These are our photosynthesizers, right? The guys we learned about in our photosynthesis unit. They're taking the sun and they're converting it to glucose. Well, heterotrophs are going to consume autotrophs. Specifically, herbivores are going to directly consume plants. Now, other heterotrophs, remember heterotrophs just means that they must actually consume organic matter for energy. They cannot make their own food like autotrophs can. And another type of autotroph besides herbivore is called a carnivore, and carnivores consume meat. So this is your secondary predator, your primary predator. Those are carnivores. Now let's look down here. The detritivores, what are these guys? Well, these are also called decomposers. They put important nutrients back into the soil by digesting dead matter. So they recycle matter. And I'm going to come back to these decomposers later because they're so important. Another way you can show energy flow is through a food web. So a food chain is very linear. It's from bottom to top, only has a few levels, but a food web is much more dynamic. It's much more of a true show of what's going on in the ecosystem. Now, very important that you understand that the arrows are pointing in the direction of energy flow. We're still showing our primary producers and our herbivores and our consumers, but we're just showing how they're all interacting with each other, right? The fish doesn't eat just one thing, or one thing doesn't just eat the fish. So we look at the bald eagle, for example. The bald eagle is getting energy from this fish, and it's also getting energy from the sea ducks. So the arrows point in the direction where energy is flowing. When you eat something, it flows from the food to you. Another way to show energy flow are pyramids, multiple types of pyramids. I'm just going to show you two here. This one's very interesting. This is an energy pyramid. So remember, all energy originally comes from the sun, and then it goes directly to the producers or the plants. There is a very interesting rule in ecology called the 10% rule, which states that only 10% of energy from this lower trophic level, all of these little levels are called a trophic level, is actually then converted into biomass in the upper level, in the primary consumer level. Biomass is simply the stuff of organisms, right? The meat, the bones, the skin, the biomass of that form of life. So, and we actually have some very nice numbers to work with. So if we look at these numbers, 1.7 million goes to the producers. Well, the producers only use 170,000. Well, then when the primary consumers consume the producers, they only convert 10% of that into their biomass. So that's only 1,700 kilocalories. We'll do more with that in class. I know that's a difficult idea to understand. Another type of pyramid is called the pyramid of numbers. This is just simply the number of organisms in an ecosystem for each trophic level. So there are 10,000 freshwater shrimp, but there are only 1,000 bleak, which is something that will feed on the shrimp, only 100 perch, only 10 northern pike, and only one of the top predators. It's called a bird. It's a bird called an osprey. So this really explains, this 10% rule explains why food chains are only 5 or 6 levels long, because it gets expensive to be at the top because you're only converting 10%, and what you have to work with is also 10% of what it was before. So as you keep going, it's just you're exponentially decreasing the amount of energy available to you, which is why there's not a lot of top-level predators in a food chain. Remember what I said earlier about decomposers? Well, matter cycles through an environment because of them. Remember, energy flows, but matter cycles. And the amount of life any environment can support is limited by the available matter and energy, and by the ability of the ecosystems to recycle the residue of dead organic materials. Why is this? Why is the cycling of matter so important? Well, it's because matter cannot be created and it cannot be destroyed. That's a law of thermodynamics. Energy flows, matter has to be cycled. Here's the basics of a nutrient cycle. We're going to go into the details of these 4 in class, But in general, they all share these features. They have an abiotic reservoir, such as the soil, the rock, the atmosphere. But then that matter sort of cycles through a biotic reservoir, like an animal or a plant. Well, then that plant or animal then dies, and then those important decomposers digest that dead material and put the matter back into, you got it, the abiotic reservoir. So notice it is a cycle of this matter, whether it's carbon, phosphorus, nitrogen, or water. So very important to understand it's a stable balance. There are fluctuations, but they're very minimal, right? Unless what? Unless communities and ecosystems become altered. And look at these pictures. We have logging, we have pollution in water, we've got urban development. What do all of these pictures have in common? Hopefully you said humans. Humans are causing all of this habitat destruction. And when we do this, it really causes a severe impact for these populations and these species. And you're going to be doing a research project at the end of this unit regarding humans impacting the environment. Now, there are some disturbances that are actually good for an ecosystem, and this is an example of ecological succession. So this is the observed process of change in the species of an ecological community over time. There are two types of succession. Primary, which is when there's no soil to begin with, only bedrock. And so we see sort of algae and lichens sort of fertilize the bedrock, and then the community starts to build back up. So there's been some disturbance where that only leaves the bedrock, no soil. Secondary succession is where there's a disturbance, but there is soil left. And the best example of this is a forest fire. So a forest fire is actually good because it sort of resets things for that ecosystem. There is soil, and then we start to see succession. So it starts with the grass, and then small shrubs, and then later large trees. Let's take a closer look at an example of secondary succession. So again, here we have our nice ecosystem full of communities, but then we have a forest fire disrupt that. And so number 4, we have everything is destroyed except we do have soil. So now step 5, we've got grasses and other small plants start to grow back, and then small bushes and trees, fast-growing evergreen trees, and then finally in step 8, our larger deciduous trees are there, and it starts to look like where it did when it began. So actually forest fires are good because it sort of resets this healthy ecosystem dynamic back in place. All right, well, I have just 3 short questions for you to answer, and we'll talk about these in class.